And Karen, thank you too for mentioning the community and the WhatsApp group and the wider work that we do. I'm 1 minute over, so I failed by 60 seconds, but that's not too bad on a 2-hour voyage. So thank you so very much, everybody, for being here. That's kind of definitely go and enjoy your day or your evening or whatever you need to do now for sure. But if you want to stick around, that would be tremendously wonderful. And I'd love to hear from everybody here who'd like to comment in the chat or put their microphones and cameras on. What has this stimulated for you? What ideas have been bubbling? What do you disagree with? What do you think needs more attention? Let's see where we can go in the next sort of half an hour to an hour, depending on how much time we need. And Shakra's put a hand up already, so that's a great start to that. So thanks again, everybody. We're back in July. Have a look on Eventbrite on our website, mkai.org. We're talking about open source versus proprietary generative AI systems, which is going to be a lot of fun, I promise you, as we delve into some of the challenges around business and ethics of these different platforms. So if you're leaving now, see you soon. You know where I am if you want or need me, richard@fosterfletcher.com or just on LinkedIn. I spend far too much time on LinkedIn. See you next month. Otherwise, see you in the chat if you'd like, and just look after yourselves. We had problems 1,000 years ago. We'll have problems 1,000 years from now. So at least this gives us something to do, huh? Great.
Thank you, everyone. It was so fun.
Thanks, Amanda. You made it wonderful.
Thanks, everyone. I really enjoyed the session. And it didn't feel like 2 hours, to be honest.
No, it didn't. It certainly didn't. It flew by. Yeah, thank you so much, Henry. Shakri, you want to put an idea for us or a comment?
Yeah. So I've been lighting up the messages as usual. But I think the forum and the panel had enough ideas and suggestions. My worry is about the persistence and to cover the entire globe. So if anybody out there has any ideas, because it's like, I save the world and the rest of them are trashing it, doesn't help. So kind of wanting to see if there is, in mechanics, we call a Maxwell line to it, where there is a balance between or at least there's a balance between the good and the bad.
Yeah, Paul, and the bad being so much more willing to do certain things that the good wouldn't do, right?
I think we've also got some, Chakri points out, these are the institutionalized biases around what used to be called the developed world and the developing world, and who gets to enjoy the rewards. And when other people think it's their turn, we say that the planet's dying and they can't. We have to look at equity. We have to look at rebalancing. That's difficult in a world that's still largely rooted in competition rather than collaboration. But there are examples of, it used to be called pre-competitive R&D, where countries across the globe are doing environmental sharing of their design data. People are looking maybe at the possibility of kind of legislating across border more. But still, I think you're right, Chakri. While most of the world's semiconductors and chips come from just 1 or 2 countries, you notice that the pressure to be environmental with those products is lower. And the similar thing's going to happen with lithium mining and the unregulated mining even of the moon. That when we think we need stuff to fire up capitalism again, all the legislation goes out the window. It becomes an inconvenience. And so, Chakri, I don't think there is an answer other than what has been said here, which is we can only right from the place of education try to bring up a generation that thinks holistically, thinks in systems, sees themselves primarily as a citizen of planet Earth and not a citizen of their nationality. Without that sense of bigger system that we're part of, then we become local and competitive. And so I would say the answer came very, very much earlier on, and it's systems thinking, which is sometimes called holistic thinking, is something we have to teach from the kindergarten upwards.
It's cross-pollination too, isn't it, Paul and Chakri? The sharing of ideas in circles that don't normally interact. Chakri, perhaps, sorry, you were going to say something.
No, I was just going to say, I'm hearing that, Paul. I'm just wanting to be a little bit more effective. I think what are we not listening that we are not getting a new crop of ideas or whatever. So in all these last 6 months of chat GPT waves, one of the things I keep reminding people is there are 700 million people in India who don't give a damn, who haven't heard of chat GPT, and they don't have a second meal, assured second meal in the day. So that equity you were talking about, Paul, is quite real, but there has to be a balance somehow, because when I look at Finland or Iceland, or it's smaller than the district I live in. The population of the district is much more. It doesn't. I'm not impressed by it at all. But for me, I look at it as an experiment. Okay, so Finland did this experiment. So what does that mean for me in my neck of the woods? So it's because I'm quite happy today to throw out the education system itself, because it isn't working for us. Well, so what should the education system be? That's the $1 million question. And so, I mean, I'm not, I think somewhere I am not ready to fix anything. I don't want to fix industries. I don't want to fix organization. I don't want to fix billionaires. I don't want to fix the education system or the healthcare system or even the SDGs. I think one thing that came very clearly in everybody's talk, and it really resonated when Henry also talked about it, and that's what we've been talking about it here in India in some circles, is management of waste. And so with that, I'll listen. I think that's a very important parameter to track for community level, and be across boundaries as well, across national boundaries as well. Thanks, and thanks everybody. Thanks, Paul. I'll listen now.
Anyone else who are in that place where the microphones can come off? You've got to imagine we're just sitting in the lounge on some sofas, maybe some coffee arrived, and it's really okay just to unmute yourself and not feel like we're chairing this.
Hi, Paul. It's Manijay. I was touched by your comments about being a citizen of the world. Can you hear me okay?
Sure.
Okay. And I remember that I wrote a poem back in 2004 about being a citizen of the world. I thought I'd read it, except I realized also I need to update it to include planet stuff in there. So my poem says, be a citizen of the world. A citizen of the world, that's who I am. To be a citizen of the world is to be connected to all, part of the same race, the human race, a totality empty of color, a race unrestrained by gender, and unaffected by age, indifferent to one's height or shape. Neither wealth nor status affect the members of the human race. For the same beating hearts, the same breathing lungs, red blood flowing in all veins, all enjoy some forte and endure some feebleness, yet all treasure the same mortal life. A citizen of the world could be from Africa or from Asia, from China or from India, from Vietnam or Iran, maybe from Iran or from Saigon, from Tibet or from the Czech, from the North Pole or from the South, could be an American or be a German. It makes no difference where we were born, or what heritage we hold, what language we speak, or what religion we practice or not, how old we really are, or what style of life we lead. For we all have a choice to stop categorizing others, stop separating ourselves, and to be connected to all as a citizen of one world. and to be part of the same race, the human race. So this is my version of 2004, and I'm definitely going to update it now with consideration about the planet and the environment and the systems and all that. But I thought I shared that. But it's been an amazing session. I've learned so much. I continue constantly learning from all of your sessions, and the influence of this content, it comes into the work that I do, the teachings I do, the trainings I do. My company or organization, nonprofit, started with mindfulness for personal well-being. And really throughout exposure to this group and all the things I've learned here and other places, now it's three-dimensional. It's three-dimensional mindfulness approach. And so I'm very proud of it, and I'm very grateful to all of you. And I've been inviting people to contribute to the book that I'm writing. It's in the edit process, and so I'm very excited about that, to share this with the global community. It has 3 workbooks, which is, see, my idea is that all the great ideas are amazing and must be implemented, but it originates from the human itself. The human was designing, the human was thinking, the human is implementing, the human who is, gathering information, researching. And every step of the way, it's a human doing and thinking. So my contribution would be to train and develop the humans themselves in governments, in, infrastructures that are within businesses, or just individuals everywhere, whatever that's necessary. So that's what I think it's also helpful to think about.
Thank you. So we have the importance of the human. We've had the views about systems thinking. Richard, I also was very much, I think it aligns what you've just said with Henry's comments around the technologies of enough. That, we talked about GDP. So many technologies in the way they're marketed, not just B2C, but B2B, are about how much growth they've got inherent in them. And then when you grow to max, you have to upgrade. And if you don't upgrade, you're somehow falling short and underperforming. That's all the kind of marketing. And yet there was something much gentler at the heart of the conversation today, where we have to frame enough, not as something that is less than growth, but is something valuable and important in its own right. There's a thing in itself.
Well, we've got weird about marketing, haven't we? And it's been this way for a long time, and now into neuromarketing and nudge marketing and so on. 2 reasons. One, because of the power of this, you're not enough without this product. Your life will be better, you'll be happier, you'll be more popular, and so on. This has propagated our marketing for years. There's no secrets here. And then also just the logistics process, that if you want to make a mold for some new product, you've probably got to make 25,000 or so of these things to make it worth doing it, even in our highly efficient modern economy and supply chains. So now you've got a problem. You've got to ship 25,000 of these things. Whether the world wants 25,000, whether you can physically sell 25,000, they're going to be made and they're going to be destroyed at some point. And so we still got this version of the world, haven't we, where we have to artificially create a demand to solve a problem that we've created.
One view I wanted to throw out to everybody here too, which we haven't talked about today, but it's very much in the Bill Gates climate change school, is that we don't need to talk about the technologies of enough, and we don't need to worry about GDP or growth, because ultimately technology will solve these problems. What we need to do is carry on pretty much as normal and just innovate, so we can block out the sun to stop climate change. We can come up with a big solution to that. And, I'm seeing a smile on your face, Richard. There's a smile on my face, but there is genuinely a strong view, that what's going to solve this is just to let capitalism continue, because at the heart of capitalism is innovation, and innovation will solve this. We just need to put faith in that religion.
Yeah, and we've had this debate recently, Paul, that the importance of capitalism in that place, because it encourages innovators around the world to do the work and to put the hours in, because you get the financial rewards. I think there's still a lot of belief that that system is at the heart of this future that we can have. The innovation story.
But isn't it true? Hasn't tech saved us in the past?
I think tech saves us from problems it's created. So it's a bit of a paradox. I see Shekhard's got his hand back up.
And we've got P&J's put
yeah,
the camera
Peter,
on, so.
the legendary Peter Jackson. I'll pause after this comment, but if you take the most pressing part of climate change, and you could argue there's hundreds, but for me, it's the deforestation of the Amazon rainforest. It's hurtling towards a devastating tipping point from our deforestation. And AI has a part in that for sure. Blockchain, Earth observation, satellite data, this kind of things. But mostly it's social, economic, it's political. AI won't save the Amazon rainforest.
Are you sure, Richard? Shouldn't we just hang in there and, wait for the 3D printers that are going to print them overnight?
Well, I mean, the worst thing, I see Peter's probably raring to go on this, is the politicians who say, right, we'll be net zero by 2050, because they think, well, tech's bound to have solved the problem by then, isn't it? That's ages. And there was a bet, wasn't there? And I'm sure somebody knows this article better than me. A neuroscientist and a philosopher bet that by 2023, we'd have understood consciousness on a neuroscientific level. And that bet was made 20 years ago. And the neuroscientist has paid out this week and admitted that it's 2023 and we still do not understand that. The philosopher is 1-0 up at this point. But I see this as sparked a conversation, so I'd be happy to listen now. Jump in.
Do you want me to say something?
I'm trying not to moderate too much, Peter. I'm trying to let this just flow, right?
Well, I mean, the first obvious thing to say is that net zero is not enough. And that's a kind of block on a recognition of the urgency of the situation, because it kind of puts the emphasis on something that might happen in the future rather than on something that's happening now. And I think in general, we have a cognitive infrastructure and a kind of social infrastructure and a economic infrastructure and a legal infrastructure that's all has a tendency to resist anything that looks like disruptive change. And the disruptive change of sort of the environmental emergency is constantly being perceived as something that will happen rather than something that is happening. So what worries me is that we don't seem to understand how we can collectively pull some levers in the existing infrastructure that would allow us to make the disruptive changes we need to fix the dire situation that we're in.
So I think, I had a boss at Oracle, Peter. Sorry, I said I'd be quiet, but you've raised such a great point. And he said, we know exactly what this client will do. And he's just pointing that, we always know what they'll do. We know what their interests are, so we kind of can figure out how they'll act. It's no surprise. And I think, this massive pot of money that Biden's made available in the States for, energy protection, renewable energies, all whatever reasons that you have for it, has sparked several, oil, gas, coal companies to work on CO2 extraction. And they're massive projects that they know are worth doing, because it's predictable that they would. These are not bad people, right? They don't want to only do projects that pollute. That's just silly. They're driven by the economics. So naturally they're doing this now. So we have a predictability about that anyway, I think.
That's a good point. The existing big so-called energy companies have sufficient wealth to do a lot of good if they deployed their wealth that way.
Yeah, and they will, I think, if that's economically incentivized. It's not even a debate, really. They'll just do it. And thank goodness it is being economically incentivized in some respects, but I appreciate that might be a one example from a very wealthy country, of course. Shakri, you put your hand up in a little while. Was it
Yes,
someone else?
yes.
Was
My
it Kishan, I
my
think, as well?
digital hand is not tired yet. So what gets my goat is the overemphasis on the wrong type of tech that we are looking at. I think the tech we need is a tech of, there used to be a word called, or a phrase called social technologies, and I've not seen it in the last 10 years or so. I think we are missing. I think if there is a metric that I want to use, is those metrics arriving out of social technologies that should bind us. And recently, I listened to a very interesting talk. I think, I hope I'm saying the name right. It's a TED talk by Peter Bogus, I think. Bogus is an anthropologist of sorts. He's lived with or visited indigenous communities all over the world, and he was interested in the concept of shamanism. And two, three things came out of that talk for me. One was, there's a lot of bullshit about psychology, and I think the current avatar of psychology, which has evolved over the last 100, 150 years, is coming out of wrong foundations. We need new types of psychology, like social constructionism. But Borges makes a very interesting point, which can be a lesson for all of us. He essentially talks about three types of connections. One is connection with the earth, the other is connection with the people, and the third is a connection with the spirit. Something about this concept really resonates with me, because spirituality is something that's crazy. In India and in the East, it's for the individual and the individuation thing. For the indigenous communities, it's always been about communities. And so there's this, I think, connection and metrics on the various types of connections I think is all we need to do. I think screw everything else. Thanks, Amanda, for the heart. Makes my day.
Hi guys. Hear me?
About 40% actually, Kishan. Try something else.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, also still terrible.
That's good now. It's good, yeah.
All right. This may be completely unrelated to what was originally being discussed just now. This was just a point I wanted to make. I think one of the reasons why we kind of so scared about what is going to happen in the future is because climate change is happening at such a rapid pace that we don't really have the window for adaptation is basically very short, and we don't really have much data to kind of go on, because we are seeing things that are happening that basically never really happened in the past. So it's brand new, and you don't really have much to relate to in terms of how to approach the situation. So I think there might be a big gap that would have to be addressed in certain areas. That was it basically.
Yes. Any other comments or contributions, questions?
No, that was basically it.
Okay. And what do you think
about
what
I just said?
Yeah, if you were asked that question, somebody else had asked it and you were answering.
Honestly, I think we don't really have a proper grasp for the bigger picture. I mean, maybe some people do, but not everyone. And it's just a matter of allowing the people that are actually the decision makers and who are actually representing a large portion of the population in all of these summits and whatever, to actually have the access to that vision and to see what is actually happening. Because on one end, you would have people who support the fact that climate change is happening and highlighting all the different changes that's been done and the negative impacts. And then you would have, on the other hand, people who are saying, well, okay, might be a natural cycle of this process. And so there are two sides to each coin. It's just that right now, what they're focusing on might be arguing whether one is right or one is wrong. But at the end of the day, there are still people being impacted whether or not this is caused by something that we brought about ourselves, or something that may be naturally occurring. And the fact of it is, we're not really adapting to it in a timely manner where we can minimize the socioeconomic impact.
Yeah, I mean, I said, I think a couple of forums ago, we've got this world where some of the people have got everything they could ever want, and they're baffled by how this didn't make them happy, miserable. And everybody else is angry that they've got everything they want, so therefore they must be extremely happy. But we have a fear-based economy. We have a fear-based business world. We have fear-based politics. Interviewed the CEO of Ocean Mind, not to be confused with Ocean Gates, a little while back. And they're an NGO looking at the fishing sector and particularly illegal fishing. They use Earth observations data to look for boats that aren't licensed. And he said, the sad fact is, and I'm saying this as well because on the chat, I was sent a private question by Ajmal, which I'm not sure was supposed to be public or not, about the ocean life. And he said, look, if you leave a part of your sort of ocean area to regenerate, it's almost certain that another country will come in and fish it. And the ocean's, sort of designated areas, and there's more sort of open areas. And now we have this treaty, I think, don't we, coming through finally from the UN about protecting it or protecting some of it. But, it comes back to the big questions, really, that if we don't want the change at the leadership level, at the CEO level, at the president level, then we're really pushing upstream.
I do think it's interesting, Richard, that if we go back 20, 30 years, I noticed we had Andrew Grantham on this call, who's written a brilliant textbook about sustainable strategy. Yeah. But even 30 years ago, if you went to universities and went to engineering design departments, some universities did not teach sustainability to designers. It was interesting. It was just something that came later. It was something you might choose to do. It was a thing called a green movement. But some universities started to be very enlightened and started to teach modules called sustainable design. The idea that environmental impact isn't something we deal with after we've made products, but if we actually design for sustainability, then we don't get those problems, in the first place, because we've been smart in our design. And it feels to me we've got a similar thing going on now, that the environmental movement at the moment is kind of more mainstream than it's ever been before, but universities up and down the UK are still not seeing sustainability as an input to education. They're seeing it as some sort of output when the supply chain is too late, and yet it feels to me that sustainable design often leads to better technologies anyway. The batteries don't overheat. We can modularize the technology and upgrade more easily. If this thing was allowed to be given a more free run, we might get more innovation than we're currently getting.
Well, Henry earlier talked about the need of the youth and so on, and I would encourage him to come to more of our MKAI meetings to see that we have a very diverse age group, but a very dynamic thinking that comes from all corners of that. There is a certain case to be made that different kinds of creativity comes from young people, for sure, and that's vital. But writing off people in their 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, it's going to be crazy. We've all got a huge part to play, and in MKAI's leadership team, I think we've got 4 decades between the youngest and the oldest, and we don't even notice who's what age.
But I just shared an experiment earlier on ChatGPT where I asked it to produce a marketing brief, and for a particular example of a product. It produced a brilliant marketing brief of about 400 words. And then I asked it to try and save energy, rewrite it and save energy. So it cut down the words by 50% or whatever, and wrote quite a good marketing brief. And then I asked it, why didn't you do that in the first place? And it kind of says, as an AI language model, I'm not I'm not programmed to do that. And yet, what if the default to generative AI is that less is more, and we can build on it if we need it, but we don't max out at the start?
Well, no, I mean, absolutely. And Kishan's got his hand up again, but this is vital that, and we saw this from the donor, isn't it, organ donations, that the countries that made the opt-in as the standard procedure had significantly more people donating than those who, opt out was the default feature. And so why not? Why not make the efficiency settings default? They are in some cases on dishwashers and things like this, and computers and PlayStations. But I'm talking about like Zoom here. Are we too optimized? Are we in too much high definition that we just don't need for a meeting like this? Think about the energy savings that could be made if we just flick that switch across technology.
Yeah. But it was certainly said, one of the criticisms of Python is that it seems to be designed to binge on itself. And that was a similar criticism of early operating systems, is that they were over-coded.
Yeah, I mean, Milton Keynes College is one of our educational partners, strategic partners. We were talking about, the sustainability has got to be in every single course, like you said earlier on, Paul. So the hairdressing course must have sustainability built into it. And when do you hear your hairdresser talking about, this product is, got more chemicals in it, or this one, is circular economy? I mean, you just wouldn't hear this kind of language.
I'm wondering if there's any confession here on this call. There's no implied criticism. I'm happy to own up myself, but people often in the West point out that they throw so much food away because they overstock and they overshop. When you bought your last smartphone, your last laptop, did you overshop? Did you buy far more than you needed? Have you just bought the one that actually environmental cost-wise, has got unlimited memory, but you're paying and the planet's paying for the memory you'll never use?
Well, I just bought a massive desktop today, so I'll opt out of this question.
Okay.
It is very fast.
Yeah,
I thought about it for 2 years before I bought it.
Yeah, but it seems to me that the marketing around smartphones, particularly, they're good at it. If you take them as a metaphor of GDP, is they're boasting max GDP in your phone.
Yeah. No, I mean, you're right. And actually, Paul, in all seriousness, I've been told this one will give me 5 years at least of high spec current performance. So that's not the same as the smartphone, because we know we're going to change the smartphone in 2 years, don't we? Really?
No, well,
Peter?
Some people might, but
well, I'm talking about the general.
Have you still got a Nokia 3110?
I have the first thing that you can actually call a smartphone, the first and only thing that I bought that you can call a smartphone is a Fairphone.
Oh, you bought the Fairphone?
Yeah.
Yeah, very
and the way I looked at that purchase was that I could replace several older systems with one system, and it would last me for years. So it's not going to be, in terms of the amount of money I spend per year on that technology, it's not a huge amount of money to spend.
So you bought a technology of enough, would you say?
There are things that it does that I don't need it to do, but that kind of come for free, as it were, which I can switch off. So in that sense, it's enough.
Yeah. Kishan, you want to add something? I mean, just jump in, honestly. I know that Paul and I can talk all day, but just jump in.
To add to the point where you're always saying, what a lot of companies, so in smartphones, they have your 3 tiers. They have your lower tier, mid tier, and your higher tier. That people just know, like open mouth to home. Right now, for the price, you would get better value for technology if you hold the device and buy something that was actually released this year. So whereas you might end up spending, we say about 400 to 500 euros on a mid-tier smartphone, you could take that same 400 to 500 euros and buy, in some cases, even a brand new smartphone that was released like 2 years ago, and you would get a significant improvement in performance. Whereas at the same point in time, you're actually using, you're being more efficient with how you're spending money. that might be a more sustainable aspect instead of going for like the next newest thing.
Thanks, Kishan. A little hard to hear you, unfortunately. I'm so sorry, but about 2/3 of the way in, I think it kind of clicked in and we were able to hear you. Peter, any comments? Did you catch it?
Yeah. It's a shame I didn't hear Kishan's full comment either. And I got the impression he was saying something quite interesting about how if you buy older technology, you're effectively doing two good things. One is that you're making sure that that technology isn't thrown away because you're going to use it, and secondly that it's actually good enough.
But interestingly, I mean, the reviews, if people haven't seen the Fairphone 4, if anyone's wondering what that is, have a look online. There's a very good review actually a couple of years back in The Guardian about it. But the Fairphone 4 is sometimes billed as the most kind of ethical or sustainable piece of technology in the smartphone industry. And it talks about modularity, which was talked about a while. So there's a design philosophy around the ability to repair this thing. They've got so much confidence. It comes with a 5-year warranty. It's repairable beyond that. They're offering 5 years of kind of operating system security patches and upgrades, which is more than any of the other companies do. But the key thing, Peter, I mean, you've got it. The reviews say this is not a bad phone. So many of the other sustainable products were not delivering at the tech spec that people were looking for, so people didn't transition across. But it gets great reviews.
Well, yeah, it certainly suits my purposes. And from an ethical standpoint, it seemed like almost a no-brainer that it would be the one I would buy. I don't understand enough about, well, I kind of do. I mean, basically lots of companies have huge amounts of money to spend on marketing and advertising, and advertising basically plays into various human cognitive defects that will seduce people into buying the shiny thing that's put in front of them. So I don't know how to solve that problem other than donating lots and lots of money to sustainable companies to make themselves more prominent.
Yeah, but I guess, Richard, part of what was being said earlier by some of our guests is the Fairphone potentially also is a technology of modularity. So we're talking about the ability to replace things, to recycle things. The same technology would allow us to go to any country and put in a different SIM if we needed to. It kind of hints at the technologies of integration rather than the technologies of competition.
Yeah, and the technology is important, but I think the way that it changes our thinking is as important or more important. And it's not that long ago that we were throwing phones away because we simply couldn't put a different SIM card in there. EE was locked to EE, Vodafone was locked to Vodafone. A technical decision. And unlike Apple fighting tooth and nail that they don't want to have USB-C and they don't want to standardize other features. I forget what the latest one is that they're being asked to do. Someone to remind. Oh yeah, removable batteries, isn't it? That's the one. They're all being told now by the EU they've got to have removable batteries, which I think, my Google doesn't have a removable battery. I mean, Apple in their case, they like the closed ecosystem. They have at least sensible reasons for wanting that. But Vodafone locking a phone to Vodafone, that's purely economical. There is no other reason for that other than to make it difficult to reuse the phone. So, that's no-brainer stuff for governments. They have to just challenge this ridiculous thinking. And then it takes innovators like Fairphone to say, okay, now we've agreed that that's nuts. Here's a better way.
So, okay. Richard, what stopped there being 6 more? Fairphone still 3 years after it was launched, 4 years, sits largely alone.
Well,
I think I can answer some of that. And full disclosure here, I used to work for a company called Symbian that provided an operating system to the mobile phone industry. And I've always felt a bit guilty ever since of being responsible for a huge mountain of electronic waste. But I think the point is that there are technologies that take a while to mature. So in those years when, Nokia, for example, were producing, every year a huge plethora of different phones for different sectors of the market, so that their basic approach was to sort of fire a shotgun of cell phones and hope that people would buy them all, and then throw them away a couple of years later because they no longer suited the requirements of other emerging technologies. And we've now reached the point where that technology of smartphones is kind of stable. It's no longer in a state of constant, annual innovation in terms of sort of major innovations. So it is now possible to buy a phone that you feel is likely to last you for as long as the hardware actually continues to function. But years ago, that wasn't the case.
Yeah, but the incentivization, sorry, James, is going to change as well. I mean, how many times have we heard a mattress advert that says, by the way, you ought to be changing a mattress every 5 years, not every 10 years. Forget that old wives' tale, now get serious. And they've just doubled their profits, haven't they? If they're on the long-term projections there from going from 10 to 5. And there might be some science to that, but it's that sort of economic model that's got to be challenged that says, okay, so it's obviously economically better for Dreams to sell a mattress every 5 years rather than every 10 years. That's obvious. So how would it be economically better for them to sell a mattress every 20 years? What would the technology have to do?
That's the point, Richard, that if I'm not only measuring GDP, because if it's GDP and we need year-on-year growth to get re-elected because of the publicity machine of the voters, what happens is we need people to be upgrading all the time. Yeah. Whereas if I've also got a bit like that with Bhutan, gross domestic happiness, and I might have gross domestic green planet behavior, if we've got another set of measures, they might encourage the technology of enough. We might actually win the election because we didn't innovate.
Jason?
I think the points that Peter added, I wanted to add on top of that. That was my thought process as well. Sometimes because it is about consumerism, I think we keep on buying the tech products, but it is important to understand the education of recycling or reusing them as well. A lot of people do not understand how or where the products can be recycled. You just keep on stacking and piling them. I've seen piles of old computers either at homes or at a home or even in offices. There are storage rooms where they just dump it. They will not make sure it is recycled in the correct manner. So I think it's a lot of tech waste that we see because of lack of education of how to reuse or recycle. And in fact, it is not even passed on to people who would be in need of technology. This is one part of the conversation. Second part of the conversation that I wanted to have is, it is regarding, I think, corporates who want to bring in sustainable practices, but because of legacy systems being used and they're so reliable on it, I think just transitioning or doing a digital transformation into the newer emerging tech, which is more sustainable or in collaboration with cloud, is so much difficult because they can't let go of their clients or the profits, which were dependent on the legacy systems. So moving directly into newer technology, which is more sustainable and transforming their whole system, I think is not very budget friendly at times. So even if the intention might be there, it's quite hard. I think it really needs to be more planned how we can transform, because if you see even job specs, there are so many jobs available just for doing the transformations. So because the skills gap is there is a skill gap to understand legacy systems to the new systems today and to see how we can make it more sustainable. So I think these are issues which really need to be discussed, when we move on from linear to circular, these are the real skill gaps that we see and issues where we want to move away from just profitability. But there is a dependency on the legacy systems, which is causing more carbon footprint, I think.
Ironically, I think that if a government were to support this a kind of reusability and sustainability industry effort, that would probably make GDP go up as an economic measure.
I think GDP is flawed, though, isn't it? Because it doesn't actually reflect necessarily that you or I have got more disposable income or more wealth. You know, I mean, it doesn't say anything about the distribution of the wealth, does it? Sorry, Peter, I can't hear you. If it's just me, I apologize.
Sorry, I muted myself by accident.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, I think. Sorry, my train of thought's gone. Yes.
I think Ireland increased GDP through tax incentives, didn't they? I mean, that's got nothing to do with general folks having more affluence.
I think part of the nub of the problem in, say, England is that you have a big swathe of the population that's effectively in poverty. And so they can't afford to behave in a sustainable way. It's very difficult for them to even have the bandwidth to think about that kind of.
Which is ironic, right? That they have to waste more to save more.
Yeah.
I mean, you've summarized the whole BS situation there in one sentence. Like, yeah, but you're right. I mean, my neighbor, but one, she moved out a while ago, 3 kids. She was just dumping everything in black bags. She wasn't recycling. But, you know, goodness me, who am I to judge? Juggling a single mother, 3 kids. What am I going to do? Tell her she's, doing stuff wrong?
Well, it would be counterproductive to even approach it like that. I mean,
I wouldn't dream of, but yeah, for sure it would, yeah.
But I think that's the kind of problem that's hidden away in terms of the output of mainstream media. You get the constant approach of saying, well, GDP is good, and there's lots of rich people around, and the poor people tend to be ignored.
Yeah. Cool.
So that's been the big issue. It's almost the issue for the future, for future forums, which is reminds me of a conversation a colleague of mine had with our local city council. The thing that was top on their agenda was digital exclusion. And ultimately, all the conversations that we're going to be having about technology, I mean, Peter's, blessedly able to afford a smartphone like I am, but some people can't even afford the broadband that they don't get to their house. So there's going to be all kinds of issues also that ultimately, if, for example, governments decide we have to pay for sustainability, well, some people might not be able to afford it. So are we prepared to have a culture of subsidy? And are we going to have a progressive tax system that allows environmental costs to be the burden to be shouldered by the wealthy? These are political questions that different countries ask in different ways. But we talk about digital exclusion here in my city of Brighton, but in some parts of the world, digital exclusion is 90%. But do you remember our very first speaker tonight? And I only say this very humbly, but for some people, stuffing a digital addicted smartphone in the hands of starving children might not be the best gift for them at Christmas anyway. There are bigger issues around equality and the environmental impact of the West on the world that we have to deal with here.
How English do you think this conversation is without us realizing it?
We can't help it, but it's always going to be a bit of a colonial conversation, isn't it?
That's what I'm thinking, yeah, because I can't tell, right? Because this is such a normal conversation. How
also the colonial thing. I think I'm a product of the colonial system.
Right.
I think we can only notice it, Richard, and do our best to, become aware of our own biases, our privileged position, And, you know, sometimes when we're quoting around sustainability, some of the best cultural practice in sustainability, the lessons we think we're learning, were there in indigenous cultures for centuries, if not millennia, and we kind of happily appropriate them as if we've just invented them. But, you know, it's Edgar Schein, the great psychologist, that said what we need to do is go into a humble inquiry around this, and underlying the word humble is actually, that keeps us more open and less biased and more self-aware.
I think so. I think that, you know, if you can genuinely have a starting point of not thinking you're right, then you're probably at least one step towards this.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's so important.
Yeah. Okay. Any other comments before we say our farewells?
I've got a general comment, which is that we often get to this point in various kind of discussions that I take part in, where a lot of the meeting is a kind of context setting exercise to get into the flow of thinking in terms of things like how do we address the problem of GDP and so on. And what would be dead useful would be to take a summary of this meeting and say, well, this is the homework you need to read for the next meeting, where you can take the next step to try and actually come up with some kind of viable idea or set of ideas.
Well, that's terrific, Peter. And I think we can do that. I think that's the idea of these quarterly events, that they are exactly on the same theme, but obviously we spice it up with some different ideas, but it's on the intersection of business model, sustainability, and technology. And we've been capturing the notes. I did quite a lot of work on last month's forum to get rid of all the fluff and just have the core stuff there. Furthermore, I tried to shorten it so that you could put it into ChatGPT. It was under about 2,200 words, so that you could produce articles and questions and reports from it as well. We even put a few prompt ideas into that text, and then we emailed that out to circa 6,000 people on the email list. But going beyond that, what you just said there, I think some required reading for, what will it be, September, I guess, won't it? It's very doable. And I will commit, you know, I'll say I'll do that for sure. Yeah.
That would be excellent.
Yeah, and I think what we're trying to do, we always do this, we're working with new clients in the organization, you know, we never send proposals, but we have these working documents with the idea that they genuinely do go in and delete what we've written or change it or add to it. And while that might be slightly dangerous on a polished piece of work, you can always put the comments on, and it will be tremendous to see people arguing in there and challenging and different perspectives and raising questions in these documents that then could be very easily summarized and produced into social shares. I'm on LinkedIn's radar myself. I'm in several training courses with LinkedIn at the moment to be a creator. So I'm certainly one person, not the only, I'm sure, but one who has a little bit of opportunity there. Thank you for the idea. All right, tea time, as we say. All right. Well, thank you for your fine company, everybody. Hey, Andrew. Any final words for us?
No, I was happy to tag along for the ride. Just great conversations all around.
Oh, that's great. That's terrific to hear. That's Jerry as well. Yeah, if you want to put your camera on for 10 seconds, just have a little wave to each other. It's just under 3 hours we've been together now, depending on when you joined. You know, like I said, there's always going to be problems, but how we speak to each other here and the kindness and so on is definitely where it all starts. Everything else can follow. Hey, Shekhar, good to see you. All right. Well, as I said before, if I'm any use to you at all, just give me a shout. I can't always respond instantly, but I do my best. You find me on WhatsApp and email and all the usual. I'm not too hard to find, I don't think. And yeah, look after yourselves. Be gentle on yourselves and each other, as always. It's the most important thing we can do. And thanks for being around today. It's been great fun seeing everybody.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, folks.
Have a good rest of the week.
And you.
Bye all.
Bye.